Have you ever felt invisible? Like you're present, but your voice, your dreams, your very being is somehow muted? That's how it felt the day my world shifted, the day someone dared to reduce me to just a baby carrier. It happened at a wedding, a place of celebration, where love is supposed to be the loudest emotion. But what I experienced was a stark and painful revelation. If you've ever been there, if you believe in the power of speaking your truth, if you know that karma has a way of finding its balance, then please, I invite you to join me on this journey. Click that like button, subscribe to this channel, and become a part of this community. Your support means the world, and it tells me you're ready for a story that will resonate deep within your soul. And while you're at it, drop a comment with the name of your city. I'd love to know where you're listening from. It was late spring, the kind where the air is thick with the promise of new beginnings, yet carries a whisper of endings too. The venue shimmered, a curated dream in ivory and gold, reflecting the setting sun's glow. My husband, Damien, ever the picture of polished charm, adjusted his tie, his movements precise, practiced. I held our daughter, Alara, close, all chubby cheeks and innocent wonder at 7 months old, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around us. To be honest, I hadn't wanted to attend. Alara was battling a nasty bout of teething, sleep was a distant memory, and Damien and I had been navigating a rough patch for what felt like an eternity. But he'd insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's my brother's wedding, Freya. We can't cause a scene. Look presentable. So, I tamed my hair into a neat bun, donned the sapphire blue dress he'd picked out, a dress that felt less like a choice and more like a uniform, and plastered a smile on my face until my cheeks ached. We found our seats near the front, just behind Damien's brother, Ethan, and his radiant bride. Damien was beaming, practically vibrating with brotherly pride. Sometimes, it felt like his loyalty to his family eclipsed everything else, including me. I shifted Alara in my arms, trying to catch Damien's eye, to bridge the distance that had grown between us. My fingers brushed his. He recoiled, as if my touch was a jolt of electricity. Then he leaned in, his voice a low, sharp whisper that cut through the celebratory buzz. Don't embarrass me. You're just a baby carrier today. Look pretty. Stay quiet. The words hit me like a physical blow, leaving me hollowed out, a mere shell. I managed a weak laugh, praying no one had noticed, no one had heard the casual cruelty. I glanced around at the other women, poised, elegant, wondering if they, too, had been reduced to their roles. Wives, mothers, convenient accessories. I didn't let the tears fall, not then. The speeches began. Damien's mother spoke first, her voice thick with emotion, sharing anecdotes of Damien and Ethan's childhood antics. His father followed, his humor dry and self-deprecating, eliciting polite chuckles. Then it was Damien's turn. He spoke of loyalty, of the unbreakable bonds of family, his voice ringing with conviction. And then, unexpectedly, the microphone was being passed my way. Would you like to say a few words, Freya? Ethan asked, his face open and kind, unaware of the turmoil churning within me. Damien turned to me, his gaze sharp, warning. You don't have to, he said, the words laced with command, not a hint of tenderness. But something inside me snapped. A dam broke, and years of unspoken words threatened to spill forth. I rose to my feet, the microphone feeling foreign, cold, heavy in my trembling hand. The room hushed, all eyes on me, Damien's burning with a mixture of anger and apprehension. I began, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat, took a deep breath, and tried again. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I hadn't planned on it, but weddings are moments, aren't they? Moments we etch into our memories. A few heads nodded in agreement. I remember my own wedding. I continued, my gaze flickering briefly towards Damien, whose smile seemed frozen in place. I was 26, full of hope, nerves, believing I was marrying someone who truly saw me. Someone shifted uncomfortably at one of the tables. I widened my smile, as if this was all a light-hearted anecdote. I remember thinking, This is the start of forever. You conjure up these images, don't you? Lazy Sunday mornings with coffee, whispering baby names in the dark, the comfort of someone's hand in yours when you're exhausted, your shirt stained with baby formula. A murmur rippled through the room. Damien's head tilted slightly, a silent warning. But sometimes, I pressed on, my voice gaining strength. You wake up years later and realize you've become part of the furniture. You're no longer a partner. You're an accessory, a vessel. A fork clattered against a plate, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. Only Alara babbled softly, innocent, unaware of the tension. My hand tightened on the microphone. I looked directly at Damien. And sometimes, the person you married, the one who once swore you made them a better person, will flinch when you reach for them. Not out of anger, but because they've forgotten you're even human. My voice cracked, but I refused to falter. Ethan, Clara. I turned to the bride and groom, my gaze sincere. I hope you never forget to see each other. Even when life gets chaotic, messy, difficult. Because once you stop truly seeing each other, it's no longer a marriage. It's a performance. With that, I handed the microphone back and walked off the makeshift stage. My palms were slick with sweat. I avoided eye contact, reaching for Alara, who was now with Damien's cousin, and held her close, burying my face in her soft hair. Damien didn't follow me immediately. When he finally did, it was behind the building, near the parking lot, where the scent of champagne and floral perfume gave way to the stark reality of exhaust fumes and silence. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, his eyes wide with barely suppressed fury. "Are you insane?" I spoke the truth. I replied quietly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. He stepped closer, towering over me. "You embarrass me in front of my entire family." I met his gaze, unflinching. I reminded them I exist. His nostrils flared. "Go home now. We'll discuss this later." He didn't offer to help with Alara. Didn't even glance at her. He turned and stalked back towards the celebration, leaving me standing alone in his shadow. The drive home was a blur. Alara slept soundly in her car seat, her little chest rising and falling with each breath. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to cry. No holding back, no stifled sobs, just pure, unadulterated grief. The morning after the wedding, Damien acted as if nothing had happened. He poured himself coffee, kissed Alara's forehead, and scrolled through his phone, oblivious to the storm that had raged the night before. I stood by the kitchen sink, watching him as if he were a stranger who had wandered into my home. My body ached from carrying Alara, my chest tight with unshed tears and a profound sense of isolation. But he didn't truly see me. He hadn't for a long time. "I'm heading to the gym," he announced flatly, not waiting for a response. "My parents are dropping by at 3. Try not to bring up last night." I blinked, stunned by his audacity. "That's it." He paused, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. "What else is there to say?" I didn't answer. There was no point. Damien didn't do apologies, not to me. It hadn't always been this way. When we first met, Damien had been magnetic. Sharp suits, quick wit, a confidence that filled every room he entered. He used to notice the small things, the way I chewed on my pen when I was nervous, the half-finished novels scattered around my apartment, the way I laughed with my entire being. But things had gradually shifted after we married. Subtle at first. He began correcting my grammar at dinner parties. He stopped holding my hand in public. Then, when I became pregnant, he seemed inconvenienced. Not angry, not cruel, just distant. As if I'd become less valuable now that I was heavier, slower, constantly exhausted. When Alara arrived, he barely held her. He claimed he was afraid of doing something wrong, but months turned into a year, and he never truly tried. I fell into the role of primary caregiver, the The feedings, the laundry, the endless nights, the doctor's appointments. Once, when I tentatively asked if he could change a diaper, he laughed. "You're better at that stuff. It's natural instinct." It wasn't instinct. It was exhaustion. It was survival. When his parents visited that afternoon, I pasted on the same practice smile I'd worn for months. His mother, ever poised, commented on my quiet demeanor at the wedding. "You were rather subdued," she said lightly, sipping her tea. "Very tasteful. That little speech of yours certainly got people talking." Damien's jaw tightened. I nodded politely. Sometimes, honesty makes people uncomfortable. She blinked, her expression unreadable. "Oh, it was honest, dear." There was no malice in her tone, just the subtle disapproval that cuts deeper than any shouting. I wondered if she had ever dared to challenge her own husband. Probably not. Women in their family were conditioned to endure, to smile through the pain, even if it was only internal. After they left, Damien didn't speak to me for hours. He retreated to the living room, the television blaring, while I bathed Alara, sang her to sleep, cleaned the kitchen, and folded the laundry. It was as if I'd become invisible. At midnight, I found him standing on the back porch, staring into the darkness. "I meant what I said yesterday," I told him quietly. He didn't turn around. "You made me look like a fool. You made me feel like a ghost." He finally turned, his eyes hard. "You think you're some kind of martyr now, is that it?" I shook my head. "No, Damien. But I'm done being invisible." He laughed bitterly. "You're not going anywhere. You need me. You have no job, no savings, no plan. You're stuck." He spoke calmly, as if stating an undeniable truth, like gravity itself. I closed the door behind me and walked back inside. And for the first time, I allowed myself to envision a life without him. The next morning I began making lists. Not dramatic, vengeful lists. Not plans for escape or retribution. Just practical, concrete steps. What would I need to do to survive? Open a separate bank account. Research childcare options. Explore potential living arrangements. It felt surreal, like I was mapping out someone else's life. But each bullet point brought a sliver of clarity, a flicker of hope. I had been a graphic designer before Alara's birth. Freelance work, small clients, nothing glamorous, but steady. I hadn't touched design software in over a year. Damien had dismissed it as unnecessary. He earned enough, he'd said. Besides, what kind of mother leaves her baby with strangers to design logos for vegan bakeries? Still, I quietly re-downloaded the software, working late at night after Alara was asleep. The first time I opened my laptop, tears streamed down my face. Not from sadness, but from a profound sense of recognition. It was like reclaiming a piece of myself, a vital part that had been dormant for far too long. Not the wife, the mother, the perfectly organized homemaker. Just me. Damien didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't ask. He started coming home later, smelling faintly of whiskey and an unfamiliar cologne. He'd brush off my inquiries with a vague, "work stuff," and I'd stopped pressing. I'd learned the cadence of his lies too well. One Thursday, Alara developed a high fever. I called Damien at his office. His assistant answered. "She's not well," I said, my voice tight with worry. "I need to take her to urgent care." There was a pause. Then, Damien's voice, cold and irritated, filtered through the phone. "You can handle this. Why are you calling me for every little thing?" "I'm not," I retorted, stunned. "This is the first time." "I'm in a meeting," he snapped, and the line went dead. I bundled Alara into the car and spent 3 agonizing hours alone in the waiting room. When the nurse asked if her father was joining us, I simply said, "No, he's busy." That night, while Alara finally slept soundly, I opened a separate bank account. I had a meager $184 left over from a canceled client who had forgotten to stop their automatic payment. It felt like a small fortune, a symbol of my nascent independence. The following week, I applied for 2 small freelance projects. They paid very little, but I didn't care. It was proof. Proof that I could still contribute, that I could still be something beyond my roles. One of the clients, a kind woman named Nora from Colorado, sent me a message after I submitted her logo design. "This is beautiful. You truly captured what I envisioned. Thank you." I stared at her words for a long time. They were simple, but no one had offered me genuine appreciation in months, maybe even years. Damien's communication had dwindled to curt directives. "Alara needs more diapers. We're out of formula. Clean the fridge." One evening, as I folded laundry, Damien walked in, holding a shirt I hadn't ironed to his exacting standards. "You're becoming sloppy," he remarked, his tone laced with disapproval. I looked at him, really looked at him. The lines around his mouth had deepened, etched there by years of condescension. He wasn't aging well. I didn't say anything. I replied evenly, turning back to the dryer. He lingered for a moment, perhaps expecting an apology, but I offered none. I was no longer his furniture. 2 weeks after Alara's fever, I landed a significant job, a full website redesign for a nonprofit organization in Vermont. It wasn't glamorous, but it came with real deadlines, real money, and most importantly, real respect. I worked on it late at night, fueled by weak coffee and sheer determination, my eyes burning with fatigue. It wasn't easy, but it gave me something Damien couldn't touch: momentum. I started meticulously tracking expenses, saving every dollar I could, selling old clothes online. Small, quiet acts of rebellion. I didn't want him to detect the subtle shift within me. Not yet. Then, something unexpected happened. An old college friend, Liam, reached out to me on social media. "Hey, I saw your name on a client's website. Are you still doing freelance work, Freya?" We hadn't spoken in 6 years. "Yes," I typed back, before I could overthink it. "Late nights, mostly. Baby at home. How are you?" "I'm in town next week." My stomach tightened. Damien wouldn't approve. He didn't like any reminder of my life before him. Still, I agreed to meet. We chose a coffee shop near the library, neutral territory. I applied makeup for the first time in months, not for vanity but for armor. Liam looked almost unchanged, warm brown eyes, a crooked smile, the same infectious laugh. "You look fantastic," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Tired but good," I smiled. "That's motherhood." We talked for hours, catching up on college memories, mutual friends, career paths. I offered him a carefully curated version of my current life, but his perceptive gaze saw through the facade. "Are you truly okay?" he asked quietly, his brow furrowed. "I don't mean to pry, but you seem like someone holding her breath." I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm just trying to find my way back to myself." His expression softened. "If you ever need anything at all, I'm here. My firm has a daycare stipend. We occasionally hire remote designers. I could put in a good word for you." I blinked, surprised. "You would do that?" He nodded. "You were the most talented designer in our class, Freya. I always thought you gave up on your dreams too soon." That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the ambitious young woman who had dreamed of working in bustling creative agencies, not the quiet, subdued person I had become, defined by diapers and clipped conversations. 2 days later, I submitted my resume to Liam's firm. I didn't tell Damien. He discovered my secret the following week, when a client invoice arrived in the mail. "What's this?" he demanded, holding it aloft like evidence of a crime. "A payment for a project I'm currently working on." He stared at me, his jaw clenched. "You should have discussed this with me." "I did," I said calmly. "You simply weren't listening." He stormed out of the room without another word. No yelling, no accusations. Just a chilling silence. That unnerved me more. That scared me. It was a stark reminder of the control he still wielded, the way he could dismiss my efforts, my burgeoning independence, with a single, chilling act of defiance. That night, I meticulously checked all the locks in the house. Every door, every window. Then I emailed Liam back. "I'm interested. Please keep me in mind." He replied within minutes. "Already did. Interview next week." The interview was conducted over Zoom. I wore a crisp white blouse I hadn't worn since before Alara's birth, a small act of reclaiming my former self. I positioned myself in the one corner of the house where Damien's presence didn't seem to linger, a tiny sanctuary of my own. The woman who interviewed me, Dana, was warm, focused, and refreshingly respectful. She didn't dwell on the gap in my resume. Instead, she asked about my creative instincts, my design process, how I balanced color theory with branding voice. For 30 precious minutes, I wasn't just a wife or a mother. I was Freya, the designer, the artist, the woman with dreams. As we wrapped up, Dana smiled. We'll be in touch soon, but I'll tell you now, Liam's recommendation carries a lot of weight. The moment I logged off, I exhaled so deeply it surprised me, a release of tension I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Alara stirred on the baby monitor, and just like that, the fragile spell broke. I closed the laptop, scooped her up, and walked around the house with her nestled against my chest, humming softly. I didn't have the job yet, but I had something even more valuable than certainty. I had hope. That night, Damien came home later than usual. His tie was loosened, his eyes slightly glassy. Out drinking? I asked, too weary to filter my words. He grunted. Work stuff. He offered no further explanation, no apology for his absence. He studied me, then glanced around the room. It was cleaner than usual. A candle flickered on the table. Alara was sound asleep. He narrowed his eyes. What are you so cheerful about? I'm not. I lied, my heart pounding. Just tired. He nodded slowly, as if mentally cataloging my response, analyzing it for inconsistencies. Well, you should be. Then, he turned and walked upstairs without another word. That week, I received the call. I was offered the job. Part-time, remote, flexible hours, and a starting salary that, while modest, was enough to build upon. Take your time to consider it, Dana said, her voice kind. I don't need time. I replied, my voice firm. I'm ready. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. Tears streamed down my face after I hung up, tears of relief, of disbelief, of a long-dormant joy finally resurfacing. I called Liam to express my gratitude. He listened patiently, then offered a piece of advice that resonated deeply within me. Now, you need an exit strategy, Freya. You don't have to do everything at once, but you can't remain trapped. He was right. It wasn't solely about the job, the financial independence. It was about something far more fundamental. Safety. Damien wasn't physically abusive. He'd never laid a hand on me. But his control was a different, insidious form of violence. Subtle, systematic, disguised as love and concern, wrapped in a smile that rarely reached his eyes. The following day, I applied for daycare assistance, a practical step towards creating a life outside of Damien's sphere of influence. I contacted a local women's shelter, not with the intention of seeking immediate refuge, but to gather information about resources, just in case. I began discreetly researching one-bedroom apartments, memorizing prices, locations, and transportation routes. I meticulously deleted my search history every night and hid important documents in a folder labeled Alara's growth charts, disguising them amongst the baby photos and developmental milestones. I maintained a calm, even demeanor around Damien, keeping the fridge stocked, the laundry done, never providing him with a reason to scrutinize me too closely. And yet, I could sense his growing unease. One night, as I passed by his home office, I felt his gaze follow me. I turned slowly. He was seated in his leather chair, hands folded, expression unreadable. You've been busy, he stated, his voice flat. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Work, Alara, the usual. You're always doing something, he continued, his eyes narrowed. For someone who used to be constantly exhausted, you seem to have an abundance of energy now. I swallowed hard. I guess I'm getting better at balancing things. He nodded once slowly, deliberately. Balance. He didn't elaborate, didn't smile, simply watched as I walked away. My hands were shaking when I reached the sanctuary of our bedroom. The morning after Damien's unsettling observation, I woke up before dawn. Alara was still asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm that always managed to soothe my frayed nerves. I poured myself a cup of coffee, checked my email, and found my onboarding documents from Dana waiting in my inbox. "Welcome to the team," the email read. I stared at those 3 simple words for a long time. They represented more than just a job. They symbolized options, and options translated to freedom. That day, I took a bold step. I visited an apartment, a small, older one-bedroom on the outskirts of town. It had creaky floors and outdated cabinets, but it was clean, safe, and, most importantly, within my financial reach. I pretended to be casually browsing, but I surreptitiously took pictures, inquired about deposits and lease terms, and committed the street address to memory. When I returned home, Damien was in the kitchen. He looked up the instant I walked in. "You were out?" It wasn't a question, but an accusation. "Yes," I replied evenly. "Groceries." His gaze flickered past me, landing on the 2 small bags I carried. Didn't seem like much for a grocery run. It was more of a statement than a question. It wasn't just diapers and milk. He nodded slowly, his expression impossible to decipher. That night, as I bathed Alara, I caught myself humming. It was a quiet, unconscious expression of hope, something I hadn't done in months. I dried her off, swaddled her snugly, and laid her gently in her crib. And for a fleeting moment, I dared to believe that I could orchestrate my escape cleanly, quietly. Just Alara and me. No dramatic confrontations, no ugly scenes. But then, the phone rang, shattering the fragile illusion of peace. Damien answered. His side of the conversation was terse, clipped. Then, he wordlessly handed the phone to me. "It's your mother." I hesitated, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying tension, a tremor I couldn't quite place. "Honey," she began carefully, "Damien says you've been going through a difficult time." My breath caught in my throat. "What?" "He's worried," she continued, her tone measured. "He mentioned you've been paranoid, perhaps even depressed, that you're withdrawing from him and Alara. He says you're overworking yourself." The room seemed to spin. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice strained. "Please don't listen to him." "I'm just checking in, dear," she replied cautiously. Perhaps it would be beneficial to speak with someone, just in case. After I hung up, I walked into the living room and confronted Damien. "You called my mother?" He didn't flinch, didn't deny it. "She asked how you were." I expressed my concerns, which, by the way, are valid. I stared at him, trying to comprehend his motives. "Why are you doing this, Damien?" "Because you're spiraling, Freya, and if you're unable to see it, someone has to." It was subtle, precise, a carefully aimed blade concealed in a velvet sheath. He was systematically attempting to undermine my credibility, to paint me as unstable, in case I ever dared to leave. He was constructing a narrative, slowly and silently, just like everything else he did. That night, I printed every crucial document, pay stubs, emails from Dana, proof of childcare inquiries. I hid them meticulously in Alara's diaper bag, nestled beneath the formula and the spare outfits. I packed an emergency overnight bag, diapers, wipes, baby food, a change of clothes for both Alara and myself, and stashed it in the trunk of my car. I confided in no one about my plan, not even Liam. I knew, with chilling certainty, that Damien wouldn't allow me to walk away easily. He needed to maintain control, and I was determined to break free from his grasp. The following week unfolded in a tense, surreal haze. I worked quietly during the day, often rocking Alara with one hand while reviewing web layouts with the other. At night, I meticulously double-checked every detail of my plan, passwords, bank statements, hiding places. I memorized addresses, phone numbers, license plate numbers, and the quickest routes to the women's shelter. I spoke to no one about my intentions, not even my closest friend, Liam. The risk was too great. And yet, despite my careful precautions, I sensed that something was imminent. Damien's behavior shifted. He ceased asking casual questions, abandoned any pretense of normalcy. He would linger in doorways, observing me without uttering a word. He would abruptly shut his laptop the moment I entered a room. He began to casually mention our wedding album, our future plans, the way couples do when they're desperately trying to remind you of who you once were, who you're supposed to be. Then one evening he arrived home with flowers. Peonies, my favorite. He hadn't bought me flowers in over 2 years. I thought maybe we could reconnect, he said, placing them carefully in a vase, as if offering a fragile peace offering. Get back to being a team. I smiled cautiously. That's very thoughtful, Damien. He poured us each a glass of wine and sat beside me on the couch, his arm draped along the back, not touching me, but hovering, a subtle reminder of his presence. You've been different lately, he said, his voice low and probing. More preoccupied, more private. I've had a lot on my plate, I replied, my tone neutral. He nodded slowly, his gaze intense. Still, you could lean on me more, Freya. If something's troubling you, you know you can confide in me. I looked at him, truly looked at him. This wasn't an act of kindness or genuine concern. It was surveillance disguised as affection. I'm fine, Damien, I said softly, meeting his gaze steadily. He paused for a beat too long before responding. Good. Because I believe it's crucial that we're on the same page. Later that night, I checked my phone and discovered an unfamiliar application installed. Something called SecureTrack. I hadn't downloaded it. My blood ran cold. I swiftly checked its permissions. GPS location tracking, microphone access, text message access. It had access to everything. I deleted it instantly, my hands trembling. Then, I frantically checked Alara's diaper bag. My emergency folder, containing all the vital documents, was gone. I didn't allow myself the luxury of tears. I meticulously packed a new folder with only the absolute essentials and hid it in a place Damien would never consider. The bottom of the garbage bin under the bathroom sink, triple-bagged in plastic and concealed within empty paper towel rolls. The following morning, I drove Alara to a local daycare center for a trial run. The building was bright and cheerful, adorned with colorful artwork. A gentle woman named Rosa greeted us warmly, welcoming us as if we were family. I lingered by the window, observing Alara as she crawled towards a group of children playing with building blocks, a genuine smile gracing her face. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a crushing wave of guilt at the thought of leaving her. Instead, I experienced a sense of permission, a quiet acknowledgement that I deserved a life beyond motherhood. Afterward, I stopped at a gas station and paid cash for a prepaid cell phone. That night, I made a call, one I had dreaded, yet prayed I would never actually need to make. The intake coordinator at the women's shelter answered. I have a baby, I said, my voice shaking slightly. And I believe I need to leave soon, possibly tonight. She didn't ask intrusive questions, the kind I knew I wouldn't be able to answer without breaking down. We have a room ready for you, she said, her tone calm and reassuring. Come whenever it's safe. Back at home, Damien was seated at the kitchen table, his phone face down, his intense gaze locked on mine. He offered a wide, unsettlingly artificial smile. Out and about again today? Yes, I replied, striving for nonchalance. Just running errands. You seem to be running a lot of those lately. I walked past him, refusing to flinch, when he stood up behind me. I wouldn't betray any fear, but inside, I knew that my time was drawing near. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed beside Damien, motionless, listening to his breathing, steady and calm, as if he hadn't subtly transformed our life into a tense game of chess, as if he hadn't already made the first, calculated move. At 3:14 a.m., I slipped silently out of bed and padded to Alara's nursery. She stirred briefly, then settled back into a peaceful slumber, one tiny fist curled under her soft cheek. I kissed her forehead, a silent promise of protection. By 4 a.m., the world outside was cloaked in darkness and stillness. I wrapped Alara snugly in a warm blanket, cradled her close, and crept stealthily out the back door. The air was cold and sharp, biting through my thin sweatshirt as I unlocked the car, praying that the sound wouldn't carry and alert Damien. The emergency bag was already in the trunk, carefully positioned for a swift getaway. The burner phone, preloaded with directions to the shelter, was tucked into my pocket. I carefully buckled Alara into her car seat, climbed behind the wheel, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't dare look back at the house, not until I saw the porch light suddenly flick on. Damien was standing in the doorway barefoot, watching. For a long, agonizing moment, he remained motionless. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward. My foot instinctively slammed down on the accelerator. I didn't wait to see if he would try to stop us. I didn't pause to decipher his expression. I drove through the deserted streets, past sleeping houses, every red light feeling like a potential trap, every passing shadow making me flinch. At 4:43 a.m., I arrived at the shelter. Not the same Rosa from the daycare center, but another woman with the same quiet strength and unwavering kindness met me at the door. She asked no questions, offered no judgment. She simply opened her arms and ushered us inside. They provided Alara with a portable crib and me with a small, sparsely furnished room with a lock on the inside of the door. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I closed my eyes without the gnawing weight of fear. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I couldn't predict the outcome of the impending custody hearings or the stories Damien would weave. But I knew one undeniable truth. We were gone. We were safe. And I was never, ever going back to that life. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in a borrowed dress, holding a microphone in my hand once again. Damien's brother, Ethan, had called. He and his wife, Clara, were hosting a small, informal gathering, a post-wedding dinner for extended family and friends who hadn't been able to attend the initial ceremony. "What you said at our wedding, Freya," Ethan had said, his voice sincere. It resonated with so many people. "We'd be honored if you'd say a few words again." I almost laughed at the irony of the request, but I agreed. Damien was there, of course. He stood at the back of the room, arms folded across his chest, attempting to project an air of detached indifference, pretending I was invisible. He had already begun circulating his version of events, painting me as emotionally unstable, claiming I'd abandoned him without warning. He'd even told his mother I was in a psychiatric facility and had informed mine that I'd absconded with Alara without his consent. But none of his manipulations mattered anymore, because this time I was armed with evidence. I had documentation, witnesses, and a fiercely compassionate lawyer, a woman who had seen through Damien's carefully constructed facade within minutes of our first meeting. The family court proceedings had commenced, a long and arduous process that would likely stretch on for months. But today, this moment belonged to me. I took a deep, steadying breath and began to speak. When I stood here a few weeks ago, at Ethan and Clara's wedding, I spoke about the importance of truly seeing each other within a marriage. And I stand by those words. But what I didn't articulate then, what I lacked the strength to acknowledge, is that sometimes you must learn to see yourself first. Because, tragically, no one else will. A hush fell over the room, an almost palpable stillness. "I spent years," I continued, my voice clear and unwavering, "believing I was somehow less, that my purpose was to shrink, to silence my own needs, to simply survive. I convinced myself that if I performed my roles perfectly, if I met every expectation, love would miraculously reappear. I deluded myself into thinking that the cruelty was temporary, a mere phase, that the coldness was a byproduct of stress. But it wasn't. It was a pattern, a deliberate erosion of my spirit." I looked up. Damien hadn't moved. His jaw was clenched, his expression a mask of tightly controlled fury. He knew, I realized with a chilling certainty, that I wasn't just speaking about myself. I was speaking about him, about us, about the lies we had both perpetuated for far too long. "I left," I said clearly, my voice ringing with a newfound strength. "And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Not because I didn't love, but because I finally loved myself more than someone else's comfort. I chose my daughter's safety and my own well-being over a life of quiet desperation." I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle. No one clapped. No one needed to. The silence held the profound power of shared truth. There were a few gasps, a few stifled sobs, and the occasional sharp intake of breath. I handed the microphone back to Ethan and walked off the makeshift stage. As I passed Damien, I looked him directly in the eye for the first time in months. I didn't see remorse or regret. I saw only a flicker of shock, a fleeting recognition that his control had finally slipped away. He said nothing because there was nothing left to say. Back at the shelter that night, I held Alara against my chest and whispered the same 3 words over and over into her soft hair. We are free. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I juggled my new job, daycare drop-offs and pickups, meetings with my lawyer, and the daunting task of finding a more permanent place to live. The women's shelter was a sanctuary, but it wasn't a home. Liam continued to be a steadfast source of support, offering encouragement, flexibility, and a much-needed sense of normalcy. He even helped me find a small, furnished apartment, a cozy space with a view of a park within walking distance of Alara's daycare. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The custody hearings, however, were a grueling ordeal. Damien's lawyer, a sharp, seasoned woman, painted me as an unstable, irresponsible mother who had abandoned her family for selfish reasons. She presented carefully curated text messages, selectively edited emails, and even Damien's mother, who testified that I had always seemed emotionally fragile. I countered with evidence of my own: pay stubs, bank statements, the testimony of Rosa from the daycare center, who spoke of my unwavering devotion to Alara. I even presented the deleted tracking app, a digital ghost of Damien's control. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a keen eye for manipulation, listened patiently to both sides. She asked pointed questions, probed inconsistencies, and ultimately saw through Damien's carefully constructed narrative. After weeks of agonizing uncertainty, the verdict arrived: joint custody, with Alara primarily residing with me. Damien was granted supervised visitation, a measure designed to protect both Alara and myself. The relief that washed over me was so profound it almost felt physical. I collapsed onto the couch in my tiny apartment, Alara nestled safely in my arms, and wept tears of gratitude, exhaustion, and triumph. I called Liam to share the good news. "That's incredible, Freya," he said, his voice filled with genuine joy. "You did it. You fought for your life, and you won." "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." He paused. "You earned that chance, Freya. You always had the talent, the strength. You just needed someone to remind you." As the months passed, my life began to settle into a new rhythm. I thrived at my job, my creativity reignited, my confidence soaring. Alara blossomed in daycare, making friends, learning new words, her laughter filling our small apartment with a joy I had almost forgotten existed. Damien, however, struggled to adjust. He missed visitation appointments, arrived late, and often seemed distracted and disengaged. I suspected he was still struggling to reconcile with the loss of control, the fact that I had dared to forge a life independent of him. One evening, I received a message from Ethan. "Freya, I know things have been complicated," he wrote, "but my wife and I are hosting a small dinner party. We'd love for you and Alara to come." I hesitated. I hadn't seen much of Damien's family since that fateful wedding, and the thought of being in the same room with him filled me with a familiar unease. But Ethan's tone was sincere, and I knew that Clara had always been kind to me. "Thank you," I replied. "We'd love to come." The dinner party was held at Ethan and Clara's new home, a charming Victorian house with a sprawling garden. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the tension that had permeated so many of our previous gatherings. Clara greeted us at the door with a hug, her eyes filled with genuine affection for Alara. Ethan offered me a glass of wine, his smile warm and genuine. Damien was there, of course, seated on the far side of the room, his expression carefully neutral. As the evening progressed, I found myself relaxing, engaging in conversation with Ethan's friends, sharing stories about Alara's latest milestones. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. After dinner, as the guests lingered over coffee and dessert, Ethan raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "To new beginnings, to second chances, and to the strength of the human spirit." He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "And to Freya, who has shown us all what it means to stand up for yourself, to fight for your happiness, and to never, ever give up on your dreams." The room erupted in applause, heartfelt and genuine. Even Damien, his face tight, raised his glass in a reluctant gesture of acknowledgement. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked around the room, at the faces of people who had once been strangers, but who now felt like allies, friends, a new kind of family. "Thank you," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "This means more than you know." As the evening drew to a close, Clara pulled me aside. "You've come so far, Freya," she said softly. "You're an inspiration to all of us." "I just did what I had to do," I replied, shrugging off her praise. "No," she insisted. "You did what many women are afraid to do. You chose yourself. And in doing so, you taught us all a valuable lesson." As I drove home that night, Alara asleep in her car seat, I reflected on Clara's words. Perhaps I had become an inspiration, not intentionally, but simply by surviving. Perhaps my story, with all its pain and hardship, could offer a glimmer of hope to others who were trapped in similar situations. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit has an extraordinary capacity for resilience, for growth, and for the unwavering pursuit of a life filled with joy and authenticity.